You can play AAA console games on your phone now, which ironically is what I'm using to shoot this video. Resident Evil Village has launched on iOS, and it might mark a new era for mobile gaming that's only taking its very first baby steps. But how is that experience in its infancy? Let's go find out. If you have an iPhone 15 Pro or Pro Max, you can buy and play Resident Evil Village natively on the hardware. This is the first of several games announced for the device, with Resident Evil 4 Remake and Death Stranding scheduled to come to the App Store before the end of the year, with Assassin's Creed Mirage in early 2024, which is only the beginning, as there are likely to be more AAA titles that will come to make it to the platform, especially as Apple introduces new tools to more easily port games to its devices. Booting up Village, I immediately jumped into the options menu to see what kind of settings I was dealing with, and was pleasantly surprised to find an extensive list of graphical options, revealing that this version of the game was simply the version that Capcom developed for macOS and the M series of chips in Apple's newest computers. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cranked everything to the highest setting. While the game at these settings certainly wasn't winning any awards for frame rate, it was actually playable, and the image quality was astounding for something running natively on the hardware. That was until I had a hard crash a few minutes into playing. That's on me for trying to fly too close to the sun, so something more modest was required in the settings. But knowing that this version of the game was the same that could run on my MacBook Pro gave me a lot of hope about its potential. Before we get into the game, I want to talk about controls. I've spent nearly all my time playing Village on iPhone with an Xbox controller or the Backbone, which is a great controller grip that clamps onto the device. You are absolutely going to want to use a physical controller such as these to play the game. As you can already imagine, the touchscreen controls for this game are a poor experience, but it's even worse than you can imagine. While you can customize the size and placement of the touch controls to better suit you, there's one feature that is pretty standard for mobile gaming that isn't present in Village. In many mobile titles that provide touchscreen thumbsticks, such as Call of Duty Mobile, the entire left and right sides of the screen can act as movement and camera controls respectively. While this is the case for the camera in Village, it isn't the case for movement, as touching the screen anywhere simply moves the camera, meaning in order to move the character, you have to hit the left virtual thumbstick precisely where it is on screen, and when you're trying to run away from a mob of werewolf baddies, it can become easy to miss that mark entirely. Not to mention that the UI controls are another level of immersion breaking being layered on top of the game. So yeah, if you're gonna play this game on your phone, you're gonna want a controller or a controller grip. Fortunately, when you utilize one of those hardware tools, the game plays just as well as it does on both console and PC. As for the game itself, when kicking the resolution down to 900p, setting most of the visual options to medium, and turning off a handful of the superfluous graphical enhancements, I was able to get a solid experience that no longer crashed on me. The game is also not locked to 30 frames per second as previously reported. You can set the target frame rate to 60 FPS or even 120 FPS, matching the screen's 120Hz refresh rate. While on medium settings, I was consistently in the high 30s and low 40s, at times getting close to that sweet 60, and I was absolutely rocking 60 and higher when I kicked everything down to their lowest setting, which is incredibly impressive considering that this isn't even available on the console release of Village. Playing the game at settings that offered the best compromise between quality and performance made me feel like I was playing the game on a previous generation console. What I also found impressive was the battery life, something I expected to be in the proverbial toilet after running the game. To my surprise, after over a half hour of play, my phone's battery had only dropped a little over 10%, compared to how quickly batteries can drain in dedicated gaming handhelds such as the Steam Deck and Asus ROG Ally, both of which can be fully depleted in under 2 hours easily. A rate of 10% drainage per half hour results in roughly 2.5 times the battery life of those devices. The iPhone is likely capping its processor's performance in a way in which those devices do not, but that's a good thing considering I want, and in some cases need, my phone to do a ton of other things. Knowing that I can boot up this game on my commute into the office and not be left with only half my battery for the rest of the day is great. Even with that being the case, which was the biggest concern for me going into this experience, I still think I would throw my Ally into my backpack in order to play this game on the go versus simply using my phone. It has a bigger screen, allows for more graphical horsepower to be put toward it, and I like having a device that's dedicated to just playing games. That being said, on my way to and from the office the other day, I was amazed at how engrossed I was playing Village on my phone. Encountering the horde of lichens in the game's opening, the simultaneously warm but haunting nature of Lady Dimitrescu's castle, the presence of the vampiric Madame herself. All of the vibes that I experienced during my first playthrough on console were right here and just as palpable on my phone. My commute flew by, much like it does when I'm utilizing the Ally in a similar manner. As of my experience so far, the pros and cons of these devices kind of melted away and left me with the simple fact that both competently run, compelling and technically marvelous games incredibly well. The difference is the average gamer is way more likely to buy a new phone than a dedicated handheld PC. On top of that, the iPhone 15 Pro is not the only iDevice that can run this port of Resident Evil Village. Any M-series chip iPad can as well, such as this first-generation M1 iPad Pro. While the iPhone's A17 Pro is a powerhouse, it still cannot beat Apple's M1 chip in terms of processing capabilities. This game on a 2.5-year-old iPad is a massive step up in both quality and performance from what is on offer from Apple's latest phone. Even with the game nearly maxed out on many of its settings, twice the resolution of the iPhone, and metal upscaling turned off, the game easily runs 30 frames per second and higher consistently on the iPad Pro. Turning that upscaler on allows you to increase that frame rate further without a major drop in fidelity. I have easily spent just as much time with these devices playing Village in a single sitting as I have with games on my Nintendo Switch or my ROG Ally, and when I remove the critical lens I'm using for this video to critique this experience, I think they're quite comparable, with the understanding that I am trading in immersion on a big TV for convenience and portability. And even then, the iPhone can be plugged in and output to that same television if I so choose. However, this obviously highlights the game's graphical shortcomings on the device, with the iPad being the hardware of choice for this task in particular. All of this is to say that out of the gate, AAA gaming on the iPhone is remarkable. Yes, you're not going to go trade in your Steam Deck anytime soon, but the difference is that the iPhone is going to continuously improve. The A20 chip that will release in a few years is going to make the A17 Pro in this phone look like garbage, and Valve has already stated on numerous occasions that it has no intention of increasing the computing power in the next iteration of the Steam Deck, instead focusing on battery life and screen quality. The iPhone might go from rivaling those experiences to leapfrogging them, and you might always hem and haw at buying a handheld PC, but you're always going to need to buy a new phone eventually. And it won't just be the iPhone. While the Snapdragon processors that power almost all the most popular Android devices often lag behind Apple's offering, the developer Qualcomm is making big strides to close that gap, even introducing a chip for laptops it calls X Elite that might rival Apple's own new M3 CPU in its line of MacBook and iMac computers. Don't be surprised if in a couple of years we see these big games also come to non-iPhones as well. As it stands, these AAA modern console ports are locked behind some very expensive devices, and the amount of titles on offer is relatively slim. But both of those issues will probably be resolved sooner rather than later if the momentum of these increasingly powerful chips keeps up at its current pace, and more affordable phones release with the still impressive hand-me-downs, kind of like how this year's cheaper standard iPhone 15 got last year's iPhone 14 Pro chip. And mobile gaming needs it. While the App Store has plenty, and I mean plenty of games, some really good ones, what it lacks are games that rival the scope of big, high-fidelity games on console. Resident Evil Village on iPhone is proof that mobile gaming can be more than what it is right now. A vast ocean of experiences with the occasional bright spot, but predominantly filled with microtransaction-forward titles. Hopefully, future releases impress just as greatly and make a new future for mobile gaming a reality.